or to free Iranian society. What's your analysis of that framing of this?
I mean, that's another, to be honest, colonial narratives. They ignore the agency of Iranian women. So Iranian women for years and years have been shown very quite strong agency to change anything that they would limit their rights. Yes, there are discrimination from the legal perspective. Yes, there are discrimination when it comes to the political participation. But I will say our war and critiques against our government, this is our war. So this is not, they cannot weaponize or fight in wars to, attack our country as a nation. So that's really important to understand. And then if really suffering of us, if suffering of the people, Iranian women is important for them, why they have ignored the suffering of Palestinian women? Why they have suffering of mothers and children killed in Lebanon, in Sudan. So they cannot selectively apply human rights politics just to legitimize the colonial actually narratives and to justify the war. War is really, if there is anyone, interested in feminism, gender equality, the first killer of any actually gender equality is the war. We saw how many children they have been killed by U.S. And Israeli attack in Iran at the school. They have destroyed infrastructure. They have destroyed the universities. So all these are against the gender equality and women issue. These are women issue. War is a women issue, and I don't think that Iranian women, they would like them to weaponize actually this suffering to actually attack Iran.
What? Yes, go ahead. Do you need a moment there, or you're okay?
Jeremy,
go ahead.
I think I need to go online. So if you don't mind.
I just want to, just to give people context here, Dr. Mehranlou is actually speaking to us from the cafeteria at Al Jazeera. She is on Al Jazeera Arabic all the time. Thank you so much, Dr. Mehranlou, for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Well, I apologize that we have to cut that short, but it was something that Dr. Mehranlou told me may happen. She is well known on Al Jazeera Arabic, where she's appearing every day to offer analysis and also engages on debate channels. And we were very fortunate to grab her in between some of her Al Jazeera Arabic appearances. She, of course, she was born and raised in Iran. She is a lecturer and academic at the University of London Royal Holloway. We'll also link to her social media account online. Thanks so much for joining us for this special live stream. And also thank you for your support of Dropsite News. On behalf of our whole team, I want to thank you for any support you offer us. If you can afford to become a subscriber, it's voluntary. We don't put anything behind a paywall, but we do appreciate your support. It's the primary way we fund our journalism. Until next time, I'm Jeremy Scahill. Thank you so much.
Well, that was the tail end of that. Unfortunately, I only got home from clinic late enough to go live and do that last tidbit. I'll probably play that again at some other point. But anyway, there was another interesting interview between Scahill and an academic from Iran, offering some interesting insights on how Iran is approaching this.
Israel had bombed it, namely it was not going to choreograph. I'm Jeremy Scahill from Dropsite News. The war launched by Donald Trump and Israel against Iran on February 28th has not gone the way.
His name is Hassan Ahmadian. You'll be seeing him a lot. This is the young Marandi
that Donald Trump imagined it would. Iran had telegraphed long in advance that it was not going to proceed the way it had in previous occasions when the United States and Israel had bombed it. Namely, it was not going to choreograph its retaliatory strikes or engage in any kind of back-channel discussions prior to launching them. In fact, Iran said that it was going to delegate command authority further down the line and that it was going to immediately begin counterstrikes on a bank of targets that had already been predetermined. So what we've seen over the past weeks is that Iran has struck U.S. installations, military facilities across the Persian Gulf. It's pummeled Israel on an unprecedented level with ballistic missile and drone attacks. And this has resulted in the United States having to evacuate military bases and other facilities across the region. Now, there has been a lot of talk about a potential deal. Donald Trump has falsely claimed for many weeks that Iran was begging him to make a deal. Senior Iranian officials told me, however, that roughly the third or fourth day of the war, after it launched on February 28th, Steve Witkoff and other American officials began reaching out to Iran, asking it to talk. And we are now in a situation where the Iranians have agreed to a 2-week ceasefire that ends on Wednesday. And there's questions about whether there's going to be a resumption of the U.S.-Israeli attacks or diplomacy is going to prevail in some form. Iran was very skeptical of entering into this kind of a temporary pause, in part because it felt that the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, the unexpected damage that it had caused to American military facilities, the fact that Israel's supply of interceptors, we know, was dwindling, that Iran had leverage that it had not had even prior to the launch of this war. And we are very fortunate right now to talk to one of the sharpest analysts from Iran. I'm referring to Hassan Ahmadian, Dr. Hassan Ahmadian. He is Associate Professor of Middle East Studies at Tehran University and is, at this point, one of the best-known Iranians, particularly in the Arabic language media, because of his appearances on Al Jazeera, where he's often fighting against 5, 6, or 7 other panelists. Dr. Ahmadian, thank you very much for joining us here on DropSite.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So I want to begin by asking you about the terms that Iran would consider reasonable or fair as part of any settlement. But the overarching factor that Iran, of course, has to deal with is the fact that twice in 1 year, when it was engaged in negotiations with the United States, the U.S. and Israel then launched, quote unquote, surprise attacks against Iran. So there's this dynamic of what does Iran want out of a deal, but there's also the fact that Donald Trump has repeatedly lied. He's very erratic. And how could Iran even believe the word of the United States at this point?
Well, I think trust is not there to begin with. I don't see Iranians trusting the United States, specifically this administration, and at any time in the future. I think they will basically bank on what they have in terms of power, military power, what they have of leverage over the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranians moved past the international community as a protector. The UN Security Council did not stop 2 wars, illegal wars imposed on the country. And so the Iranians learned it the hard way. It's about power. If you don't have power, you will be subject to annihilation, because they came with goals, bringing down the system, and some of them spoke about bringing down Iran. Some of them spoke about partitioning Iran. So it's basically Iran that is being targeted. And so the Iranian perception is that we cannot trust them, and we cannot trust the international community to protect us against or shield us against aggression by Israel and the United States. And ergo, we need to bank on our power. And what is the power? It is an asymmetric power. The Iranians, of course, their power does not match that of the United States, definitely not. The combination of U.S.-Israeli Air Force is basically way beyond what Iran has. Their military power is way bigger. I mean, if you look at the budget, military budget, Iran's is less than 1% of that of the United States. So there's no match there. There's no balance there. But what makes the balance, what inserts the balance on the ground is the mere reality that Iran has an asymmetric capability to push back against aggression. And we saw that unfold in the 39 days of attacks on the country. And so back to what your question, I think Iranians do not trust the Trump administration at all. But what they're banking on is the fact that they stood against an aggression and forced them out of this aggression short of achieving any of their goals that were stated. And secondly, they're building on the leverage they have. That includes control of the shipments through the Strait of Hormuz, and also, of course, other basically influencing variables such as the nuclear program, such as Iran's capabilities in the region, that is the axis of resistance. All of these combined, the Iranians see that they can balance asymmetrically the power of the United States and can push it back. And so they don't trust it, though they go for a negotiated settlement, because at the end of the day, you have to stop the aggression. And there are ways. Now, how the Iranians view these ways, I think we can talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's true that while Iran is being militarily assaulted by the United States and Israel, that it has shown that it can certainly win in an asymmetric sense, because it can block the United States from achieving regime change, from invading and occupying Iran, from imposing a different form of government. And Iran has shown an ability to also respond on a symmetric level, because when the United States and Israel attack certain types of targets in Iran, Iran has shown that it can respond in kind in the Persian Gulf and also in Israel. But if that's taken away, if Iran is no longer in a state of war, which clearly it has shown an ability and a capacity to operate very successfully in, and there is some sort of a deal, then Iran risks, it seems, a scenario where if it then reimposes some new reality on the Strait of Hormuz, or if it launches strikes, that it would be portrayed, as restarting the war. So I guess what I'm asking is, if Iran gives up in some form its highly enriched uranium, which it says right now it's not going to transfer it out of the country, and it gets sanctions relief, it gets some funds unfrozen, those things can be reversed or gone back on by the United States. But Iran, it seems, would have to give up irreversible things, such as the enriched uranium. So I guess what I'm asking you is, what does a fair deal and a realistic deal look like, given Trump's obsessive discussion about highly enriched uranium and wanting Iran to have irreversible conditions that it accepts?
Well, many points there. I think the Iranians have made it clear they're not willing to let go of their highly enriched uranium. They are willing, though, to dilute it back to 20 and then below that, 20% and below that.
That would be silly, by the way. That is far too conciliatory a position to have.
But giving it up, that's not an option. We had the spokesperson of the foreign ministry saying that the uranium is like Iran's soil. We will not give it up to the United States or any other party. But there are ways to remedy concerns if those concerns are real on the part of the United States and other Western powers. The Iranians are offering them that they can dilute it back. They can bring in transparency through the IAEA. All the things they did, but still they were subject to aggression. But the reality is that, as you said, Iran can give up and then be subject to violation and then maybe aggression again. That's a very possible scenario, taking into account the previous years, from 2018 till now. What the Iranians are thinking is quite different. I think this war and the previous war, the 12 Days War, changed the strategic calculus in Iran in a way that I personally never saw, in the sense that we are to bank on the capabilities that we have, and we have a guarantee. Now you're talking about, opening the strait, closing the strait, that can happen, but of course can bring in pressure on Iran. But things have changed to no return, to my understanding. The strait is the key and is the table of negotiations. Everything is being put on that table. You want to get into negotiations, the Iranians say to the United States, stop the war in Lebanon. You want to have free flow of shipments and goods through the strait, then you have to give Iran the remedies to what you did to the infrastructure and the sanctions, unilateral sanctions you imposed on Iran. So that's the key to all issues. It transformed into the key. And I think it's easy for Iran to use it. Now, of course, there are different aspects to it. But the clear picture of it is that we will get sanctions relief. That's the fair deal, if there is any fair deal. We will get sanctions relief, we'll get reparation for the aggression on the country, and in exchange, Iran will bring in the IAEA to provide transparency, dilute back its highly enriched uranium, and of course try to remedy relations in the region with
Don't do it.
GCC countries. And of course, the United States can, talk to Iran on different matters as well. That's the general sense of what a fair deal is. But we know that there is no trust, as I said. And so what guarantees for Iran? Again, it's the Strait. You violate your commitments, there is something you have to pay here. And that, I think, changes the mentality. Iran didn't have much to offer back in 2018 when the United States violated its commitments in the JCPOA and, in extension, the UN Security Council 2231. But at this point, it has tangible leverage. That is, one is, of course, the main one is Strait of Hormuz, but also the unity of the fronts. If you violate one front, the other fronts will be open automatically. That they showed in this war, and I think they will stick to moving forward. So we're talking Trump's language now. It's not about international law. He never observed any law internationally. He basically, when it comes to Iran, he violated each and every one of them. And also, of course, towards the Palestinians, towards others in the region. But we're talking about Iran. With regards to Iran, he violated each and every law. And now the Iranians are talking his language. Give and take. That's a fair, that's what brings up a fair deal. You can't just take and not give. You violated your commitments, now you have to pay for it. You attack the country, and now you have to pay for it. If you don't do that, there is something that we can use against you. And it's very effective. And it's, as you target our people, we are targeting the pockets of your people in terms of oil markets and energy markets, and in terms of global economy. That's the asymmetric balance based on reality and power projection that is not necessarily similar to that of the United States, but it's as effective as that of the United States.
Well, you raised a number of interesting questions, but it also recalls to mind that prior to the U.S. and Israel launching this war on February 28th, when there were negotiations and discussions in Oman and then in Geneva, there were wide reports, and in fact, Iranian officials confirmed this for me, that Iran was willing to put on the table a resumption of deals that would see the United States working in the oil and gas sector inside of Iran as part of a deal. There's also some discussion of what a compromise might look like at regarding the administration of the Strait of Hormuz. Given that Trump is so transactional and that he is using the presidency in the United States in a very clear and blatant way to enrich his family and his cronies, not just with insider trading, but the mere fact that his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is just swimming in Gulf money, has all these initiatives with Israel, is very close, personal friend of Benjamin Netanyahu, and the fact that Trump, really views himself as kind of businessman as president. What could that aspect of a deal look like regarding oil and gas in Iran and Strait of Hormuz? Is it your understanding that any of those things are in play now, as they seem to have been back in February?
Of course, I think the Iranians' main issue here is sanctions relief. And the main aspect of sanction relief is Iran's oil and gas market. That's the main thing. The Iranians need investments in those aspects, in those assets and their oil fields and their oil and gas infrastructure. And the sanctions have prevented them from developing those infrastructure. And I think the trade-off is for transparency in terms of the nuclear program and a non-aggression pact, if that is necessary. There have been ideas floating around that the United States and Iran can sign a non-aggression pact that includes the region, that is, U.S., leashing Israel from attacking Iran and its allies, and Iran saying that we will not attack unless attacked, which is what happened, basically. And so that's how the Iranians are, trying to convey their way of dealing with the Trump administration. We know that Israel has immense influence. We know some Arab countries have influence, but the war showed that despite their efforts not to see this war unfold, the GCC countries, we saw them being outbalanced by a single person, that is Bibi Netanyahu. And so we know that the leverage there is way bigger than that of the GCC countries. Now with the war going to where it went and the shortcomings on the part of U.S. and Israel in terms of achieving their goals, I think that relationship can be tested between Trump and Bibi Netanyahu. We don't know the essence of it. There are lots of rumors and lots of talks and lots of news, as you know, about it, about the influence Bibi Netanyahu has on Trump. But be it as it may, I think this war showed that what Netanyahu has been preaching and advocating is not based on reality. It's wishful thinking, and I think that has some sort of influence on how Trump thinks, how the United States thinks, and so I think moving forward, it's not about who has how much of influence in Washington. It's about the possibilities. The Iranians showed that they can fight a lengthy fight. As we speak, there are discussions in Tehran. Why did we stop the war? That's very much debated in Tehran. Why did we stop the war on Israel? They attacked us. They had to pay a bigger price. They attacked our infrastructure. We shouldn't leave them without really, putting immense pressure and denying them of anything that they can look at as sort of achievement moving forward. And so that debate.
Can I just ask? You're raising something that I think is really crucial, and you're right. And I've heard this also from Iranian officials. There are different camps of thought in Iran, including in the power structure, on this issue. The Israelis and the United States clearly were finding themselves enmeshed in a quagmire, and Israel's interceptors were running low, and the infrastructure of the U.S. military in the Persian Gulf had been damaged to an unprecedented degree. And I think that there were many people in Iran and in the broader axis of resistance that felt that the Iranians actually had Trump painting himself into a corner, and that this pause of 2 weeks essentially allowed them to restock, to prepare for another round, and also stripped Iran of immediate tactical leverage.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I hear from my military friends or military experts friends that you can't just rearm as a U.S. and Israel, because anti-defense missiles are not produced en masse. They can't be. There is an infrastructure that they cannot produce beyond that, the capacity of that infrastructure in the United States and in Israel. And so they're running low. They will be running low for some time to come. So they cannot just restart the war in 2 weeks. They cannot just restart it in 2 months. They need a lengthy period. The 8 months that ensued after the 12 days war is quite telling on them rearming and then attacking the country. And of course, we know that whenever the war would stop, the Israelis and the Americans would rearm. So does Iran. Iran is also trying to rebuild, rearm. Of course, they attacked much of Iran's infrastructure. They need to also remedy those. So it's a two-side story.
Just to emphasize the point you're making, Majid Mousavi, the IRGC's aerospace commander, said on Sunday, and this is a quote, "During the ceasefire, our speed in updating and replenishing missile and drone launch pads is even faster than before the war. We know that the enemy is incapable of creating these conditions for themselves, and they're forced to bring ammunition from the other side of the world."
What up, Larry?
So
nice to see you.
He's essentially making the point also that you said you've heard from other military experts. But on the tactical matter, though, which,
just doing a quick post-clinic stream.
Challenges of the U.S. and Israel restocking in that capacity. But on a political and a negotiation level, there's also
I don't know who the fuck is in here, but
stripped itself of kind of unprorthented leverage by allowing.
You should all follow
Leaping
Larry, our foremost expert.
Well, I think it has some merit
on North Korea, the good Korea, and Juche. Just really a generally learned person all around. I'm not a theory guy, by the way. Like, I've read a little bit, but I'm not, like, I look at this from a international relations, like, kind of pseudo-Marxist point of view. I have, like, an intuitive concordance with Marxist-Leninist thought. I don't actually know much about it, though. So what I know is from a historical perspective. But Larry knows a lot about this shit. You can learn a lot about. He's got a lot of stuff that he's posted online about. He's done various readings, and just a very educational viewer overall. Great person, great streamer. So do follow Larry, trying to smoke less on stream, so I got it all. Hope you're okay. No, I'm not, but that's fine. None of us are really okay.
And I think that has been also part of the discussions in Tehran. But all in all, Iran wanted to push back in a way that forces its foes to think twice and thrice before attacking Iran once more.
The chain smoking,
And I
yeah.
think they did that. The United States will think more than once before attacking Iran moving forward. The region will be against any war, though in the previous war, in this war, they didn't really matter to US on its priorities. But I think they will have more to play in terms of politics in the States, pushing back against the possibility of another war. Israel itself, my understanding, and I'm a follower of Israeli politics and its power structure, Israel showed and showcased once more that it cannot shoulder such a confrontation with Iran absent the US. It cannot really go for a lengthy period of time fighting Iran the way it did and receiving Iran's missiles and drones without US backing. It cannot just do that. And that's a shift in the power balance of power in the region. You cannot do much without the United States. And with the United States, you didn't achieve your goals. That's important message. And I think that's what the Iranians are banking on moving forward in terms of negotiations. Now, you can argue that the Iranians could have continued for some lengthier period. They did. The second week, the Americans, I mean, the end of the first week of the war, the Americans were sending messages left and right to try to come to terms with Iran to stop the war. They knew it was a quagmire. There's nothing to achieve. And I think even before the war, many Americans were like, there's nothing for us in it. It's an Israeli war. We are doing Israel's bidding. That was clear. And from the get-go, after their imaginary way of thinking of Iran killing its leadership and then that system would collapse did not materialize. They realized it's a quagmire. They needed to get out of it. And the Iranians continued for roughly 40 days. And then they decided they can get out of it with their deterrence being strengthened, with their cards being strengthened, and with negotiations to translate those cards that were strengthened into economic.
I'm like you, I sort of already knew ML theory. Everything I read just confirms things. Basically, you got far better geopolitical analysis on here than most. I mean, that's a nice thing to say, but
economic achievements. I think let me point to two factors that I think are important for the Iranians getting out of the war. Two aspects are crucial. First is their security, and second is an economic outcome. The security, part of it is guaranteed, or at least strengthened, as I said, with them fighting a lengthy war against two big foes or two nuclear powers, and not giving anything up, but also achieving strategic points. And also, of course, they see in a deal maybe strengthening this part of their deterrence moving forward. And of course, the rebuilding Sayyid Majid.
The more you learn, the less you know. That's the paradox.
Mousavi's comments are important because he's the head of the aerospace division. He's basically managing the two pillars of Iran's military power, that is the missiles power and the drones power. And so when he's saying that we are rebuilding faster than any time before this, that's only natural for Iran because it was subject to aggression from two powers and it needs to get ready for the next round. Whether or not it happens, that's another story. The second aspect that I think is very important is an economic outcome. The country was subject to unilateral, illegal sanctions, and now there are differences on the international sanctions on Iran. Of course, China and Russia and Iran are saying there are no international sanctions. That's another thing. But what's important is the war and attacking Iran's infrastructure. The Iranians are saying, if we are to get out of the war and go for a settlement, that settlement needs to have economy front and center. You can't have sanctions on Iran and expect Iran to live with it and let you use its territorial waters in the Strait of Hormuz.
This is something that I say, Larry, ultimately, I know that a lot of people don't have a lot of time to read about theory, really study about this stuff, and that's fine. There's only one question that I have for people, and this is kind of an iteration of Alexander Coburn's question, which is, your hate pure? And my question is, when the hammer falls, whose side are you on? Whose side will you choose ultimately? That's all I need to know. I know what side I'll be on. And if you don't have, I guess Alexander Coburn's question, like, is your hatred pure? Is like, if you don't have a sufficient passion, if you think this is all about team sports, and you're ultimately not willing to put any skin in the game when the hammer falls, then I don't trust you, and I kind of don't want you on my team. I mean, you can be on my team, but you can be a reserve player, you can be an outfielder, you can, raise awareness or whatever the fuck people do. But, no. Yeah. That's the thing we get called a campus. That's sort of for, yeah. Yeah, there's a real campus hours in this stream, by the way. Because whenever you hear somebody dismissively referring to us as Maoist third worlders, which is a favorite phrase used by a certain very large streamer, who's, on the left. It's fair to say he's on the left. You kind of like, when you think about that sentence, you think that's like most of the people. Most people in the world live in the third world, actually. So you're dismissing about 80% of the planet. It's a very weird thing to say. It's very American-centric.
Iran
Campism is the only right position.
will observe the Strait, no matter what deal they get to, only to see that this is, or make sure that this is not being used against them moving forward. So the military blockade, that is blocking any military movement through the Strait, will continue indefinitely, to my understanding. But economic shipments, the Iranians are happy to live with, provided that the sanctions relief and reparations for the
some
war.
of the streamers will say
are
USA
provided to
collapse
Iran.
will be
That's what the Iranians agree.
hard for everyone in the whole world. Like, speak for yourself. Yeah, I mean, like, in some ways it will be, but I mean, in like immediate ways. But that's. Ultimately, it's a slow death, a slow, painful death, or a quick, you have a needle put in. Painful, but liberation and self-reliance and sovereignty. I know which one I'd rather pick.
On any step away from this trade-off creates trouble in Iran, because it will be creating divisions. And I don't see the Iranians going to that direction at this point. They would stick to what they have a consensus on, that is, this is a fair trade-off.
Donald Trump has been fond. He's trying to manufacture a kind of victory narrative, and he keeps returning to several themes. And one of them is that he's already changed the Iranian regime. And of course, he's made numerous false claims. The biggest is that Iran has been begging him to make a deal. I think it's plain to anyone that paid attention to any of this that Iran has been in control of when there are going to be talks, and that no matter what Trump has threatened, including literally saying that he's going to destroy an entire civilization.
And by the way, there are countries that are very well prepared for this. Namely, Larry's specialty, North Korea. North Korea will not be affected at all, I think. Will only be affected positively by an implosion of the Western order. And a great many countries are going in this direction as well. We see most of Asia, well, a lot of Southeast Asia going this direction. Countries like Burkina Faso, Mali. The other one? There are like 3 African states that broke off from ECOWAS, who have made self-sufficiency their top priority. If you prepare for it, you'll be okay.
That hasn't moved the needle at all.
Iran, in many ways, yeah, Iran is one of them. Yeah. Russia, China. I see China and others repairing organic trade routes, etc. I think it would be hardest for those who are middle-class, minded proletariat. A bunch of us natives already have to organize with food shortages, etc. in mind, yeah. It will be hard for people in the so-called first world, and I use this term in the correct sense. So for those of you, I don't remember if I've ever explained this before, but the terms first world and third world came about because of your alliance with your alignment with the Western countries. So First World were people who were aligned with the United States and the West. Second World was never a thing because they were already talking about an assumed enemy, which is the Eastern Bloc. The Third World were the countries that were basically kind of unaligned, which is most of the planet. So when I say Third World and First World, I'm talking about the correct use of the term. When people say Third World now, like in the casual parlance, it's used to describe, it's kind of a little bit racist, where they're talking about poor, like underdeveloped. That's what they mean. Third world, poor people is what they mean. But that's incorrect. That's an incorrect understanding of what the term is. The informed NAM, DPRK is still part of it? Yeah.
Massive bombing of Iran hasn't moved the needle at all. I think anyone who has eyes to see is clear on this. But it is true that the United States and Israel assassinated large sectors of the very top leadership in Iran with the opening hours strike against the supreme leader Ali Khamenei, leaders of the IRGC, political leaders of Iran. That's certainly true. And I'm wondering, though, when Trump says, there's a new regime,
Iran really is
people in his
Juche-coded,
administration
now that I
also
think
sort of try
about
to
it.
compare it to Venezuela and the Israelis are pushing this talking point that some of the leaders in Iran right now are the kind of Delcy Rodriguez's, of the Iran war. But
Yeah, I saw that as well. Iran say they will open the strait when the frozen funds are released. 11 trillion. I think that's what the number is. I don't know what the... 4 sets of 3 zeros. That's a trillion, right? I think it was... I don't know what the formatting is these days, but I think it's 11 trillion. I've said for years why others laughed at me that Korean Revolution and Juche influenced far more movements than people realize. Yeah, quietly they did. Yes. I mean, I've read that they've assisted in training Hezbollah, assisted in training Hamas, probably also Iran. They've talked with Iran. And through that political dialogue. Yeah. Self-sufficiency. Globalization and trade is a myth until the entire world is socialist, or most of it. Because there will always be a disadvantage on one side. One side will always be looking to offload their capital and provide debt. Which is, we can see that case with Greece.
I think it would be really interesting to hear your detailed breakdown of who you think is making decisions in Iran right now, how the different echelons from the political sector, the religious sector, the military sector in Iran are weaving. There, of course, is a supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei. He's released a number of statements, though he hasn't publicly given a speech. Iranian officials are saying that's for security reasons at this point. But Hassan, I really would love to hear your understanding. I recognize you're not an official from the Iranian government. You're an independent analyst. But can you break down your understanding of who's in control and how decisions are being made?
Yeah, of course.
Just before he does this, I'm going to read this. Just found this 1978 article from a South Korean publication listing and denouncing the DPRK support for all these terrorist groups. And I can't believe they thought this made the DPRK sound villainous instead of extremely heroic and badass. DPRK says terrorist groups. Seoul Vantage Point in English, Volume 1, Number 6, October 78, pp 18 to 20. Article, Pyongyang's activities and support of terrorist groups. I'm going to read out this whole thing. So I hope you're ready. Article 16 of the North Korean Constitution reads, the state, in accordance with the principles of Marxism-Leninism and proletarian internationalism, unites with the socialist countries, unites with all the people of the world opposed to imperialism, and actively supports and encourages their struggles for national liberation and their revolutionary struggles. Standing on this principle is, among others, North Korea's extension of financial and military aid to terrorist groups in many foreign countries. That's an editorialization there. That's the first bit was a quote. revolutionary struggles. And then standing on this principle is, among others, North Korea's extension for financial. This is an editorial comment. Pyongyang's moves are directly connected with its efforts to form and enlist international support for its unification policy. President Kim Il-sung stressed at the 8th plenary session of the Fourth Term Workers' Party Central Committee the need for uniting with international revolutionary potential, as well as for strengthening and developing revolutionary potential in South and North Korea in order to achieve unification on Pyongyang's terms. He reiterated the same strategy at the Fifth Party Congress held in November 1970. Wet my whistle. North Korea first translated Kim's words into action in 1966 when it provided the Forces for National Liberation, or FALN, in Venezuela with $50,000 in support of the FALN scheme to overthrow the Caracas government. Caracas. The programs expanded among the Asian and African continents as well as other countries in Latin America. Pyongyang's move in this direction got a new momentum in 1972 when it established a guerrilla training camp in the vicinity of Pyongyang. Defectors from North Korea pinpointed... When it established a guerrilla training camp in defectors from North Korea... What, they defected from North Korea to North Korea? Pinpointed the camp's location as... defectors... They're talking to the... Okay. Defectors from North Korea pinpointed the camp's location as Wonhung-ri. I don't know how to read Korean, including the transliteration, so I'm probably going to get this wildly wrong. Kangdong-gun, South Pyongan Province. Following is data on North Korea's activities in support of terrorist groups all over the world, compiled by Naewo Press. Array is a distance measurement of some kind. Okay. Are in the right place? Okay. Latin America. Argentina financed the People's Liberation Army with 95,000. Is that what it says? Why can't I zoom in? Okay, there's possibly another digit here. So X 95,000 in 1971 to 1972. Helped establish a guerrilla base at Sata in December 1973 and trained a cadre of 30 to 40 Argentine guerrillas, exceeded 1.6 million in aid to the Revolutionary People's Army of Argentina, the Fatherland Safeguard Movement of Paraguay, and Latin America, a radical leftist group, in October 1977. Bolivia gave 280,000 to leftists from 1965 to 1973 to aid their anti-government activities. Brazil helped establish a guerrilla base in November 1970 in the vicinity of Porto Alegre. Trained 16 guerrillas and provided the guerrilla organization with $50,000 for arms purchases. That's not a great deal. Chile. A North Korean agent, Kim Chang-bok, was deported. I had a lot of hummus. I'm getting gassy. A North Korean agent, Chang-bok, was deported by the military government in June 1973 on charges of helping an anti-government guerrilla group called Leftist Revolutionary Chile. Supplied rifles and other military equipment to communist-oriented leftists in November 1975. A delegation of the Chilean Leftist Revolutionary Movement Central Committee, led by its General Secretary, Andres Pakistal Allende, visited Pyongyang in November 1976. Costa Rica. 4 North Korean diplomats were arrested on suspicion of instigating anti-government student demonstrations in May 1975. The 4 were Kim Tong-un, Cha Pyong-guk, Park Hae-bu, and Kim Hee-son. Yeah, this sounds sick. I had no idea that North Korea was this active. Guatemala trained over 100 members of the Guatemalan People's Liberation Army in North Korea. Guyana. In a guerrilla camp in Guyana, about 800 guerrillas were trained by North Korean, Communist, Chinese, Cuban, and Palestinian instructors in October 1976. That is so awesome. Mexico trained 50 members of the Movement for Revolutionary Action in North Korea for 6 to 13 months. In 1971, North Koreans were found working in MRA in December 1973. Paraguay gave 180,000 to Rajas for his anti-government activities in 65 to 73. Peru. 20 Peruvian women were trained within the compound of the North Korean Trade Mission in Peru in anti-government subversive activities in April 1977. A considerable number of Peruvian students were trained in guerrilla warfare in Pyongyang in early 1977 during the July 77 general strike in Peru. North Koreans provided military training to members of an anti-government organization at a guerrilla base near Lima. United States. Okay. North Korea. Okay. I wasn't familiar with your game. The United States. Heart of the Serpent. North Korea furnished booklets on revolution and guerrilla warfare to the Black Panthers, comprising over 1,200 blacks in 66 units. I'm just reading the page. I don't know if that's politically correct. And other leftist organizations in the United States in June 1971. With the US bicentennial in mind, North Korea invited the Chicago district leader of the Puerto Rican Socialist Party, Juan Menendez, to visit Pyongyang and assured him of North Korean support in a joint communique in June 1975. Uruguay financed a leftist group of the Socialist Party with $343,000 in 65 to 73. Venezuela provided the Force for National Liberation with $50,000 and supported their guerrilla activities in mountainous areas in 66. Algeria, at a major training ground for Palestinian guerrillas, Communist, Chinese, and North Korean instructors trained Algerian guerrillas in 1976. Algeria, baby. We got an Algeria mention. Chad trained members of an insurgent army, including its leader, al-Basidik, in October 1969. Palestine, Arab guerrillas gave 3 to 5 month training courses to 30 to 40 guerrillas from Palestine, Zaire, Angola, and Mexico at the guerrilla training camp in North Korea from January 1972 to January 1976. Provided Arab militants with weapons and trained 30 PLO guerrillas in North Korea in August 1972. 70 to 80 North Korean instructors trained Palestinian guerrillas in 73. 12 Palestinian guerrillas of Hawatmeh, PDFELP. Is that the same thing as the PFLP? Underwent a 1-year course of military training in North Korea in September 75. The training was completed 3 months later. Rhodesia. Oh, anything you do in Rhodesia is salutary. Sent military advisory groups to train black guerrillas in November. Somalia. January to July 76. 5 guerrilla groups with 100 to 150 each group were trained in North Korea, Asia, and Europe. Sri Lanka. All 18 North Korean diplomats in Colombo were ousted for giving financial support to the People's Liberation Front, which tried to topple the government in April 1971. Thailand gave guerrilla training to 75 members of the Thai Communist Party. In North Korea, Northern Ireland announced its support for and furnished Marxist training to the rebel Irish Republican Army in May 1972. Come out, ye black and tans. Come on and fight me like a man. Show your wife how you won medals down in Flanders. Tell them how the IRA made you run like hell away from the green and lovely lanes of Killashandra. West Germany. The Baader-Meinhof gang. Oh yes, this is one of my favorites. A West German terrorist organization, a West German insurgent organization requested North Korean military training, as well as political cooperation. The group asked Kim Il-sung to supply it with automatic rifles and military training. Dude, I had no idea that North Korea was that active. That's so sick. Thank you for telling me about that. If anybody, well, Larry posted the link. This is like a full inventory of what North Korea did to assist budding liberation movements around the world. He's posted the link up here. See it up there. I'm gonna bookmark this shit. And yes, it does indeed make them sound based. More than anything. That was written in the 70s. You can imagine how much is written since then. Yeah, I mean, I've heard they've helped train Hezbollah, they've helped train Iranians, they've helped train Hamas. They're in Russia now. You know. North Korea, a quiet achiever in liberationary activities around the world. During the war with Yemen and Saudi Arabia, DPRK was directly sending weapons. Yeah, nice. Yeah. Sick, man.
But first, Trump has been piling a lot of points suggesting that he made an achievement.
Well, the USA cried about it in
I've been
sanctions.
following U.S.-Iran relations for decades now, and I can see that he didn't achieve anything. He actually was forced out of the war, and he was trying to get an achievement. The Iranians denied him any achievement.
What's up,
His main
Sugar Villain?
achievement is
Nice
the
to see you.
assassinations that he did and Israel did basically in the beginning of the war, and even that pales in comparison with what Iran achieved on a strategic level. And actually, the smooth way the transition of power happened in Iran is quite telling as to what extent this was an achievement for him and for Israel. Now, when it comes to decision making in Iran, I think that's, he has been on the Israelis and the Americans, the administration in the US, have been on a cognitive.
So you can imagine how, in addition to that direct activity, just the example they serve standing against the empire influenced so many other movements. Yeah, I mean, North Korea and Cuba, the two countries who really did this. I often wonder what would have happened if the Soviet Union earnestly and honestly approached it in a similar way. The world could have been much different.
Warfare, trying to talk differences or touch differences in Iran if they exist. And I think that has been part of it. There's
in case, like, anybody like Zhugashvilin probably knows this, I'm sure Leaping Larry knows this, but the Soviet Union was actually very reluctant most of the time. They were extremely cautious when applying aid and giving assistance, to the point of being crippled, like, where their foreign policy was concerned. They were extreme. They continued to. They really believed that the United States was a country that negotiated and spoke in good faith, which is extremely naive of them. It was one of the most naive series of governments, actually, in the Soviet Union. Yeah, Russia today, in many ways, does more. It does in aid of anti-imperialist countries, yes. And I mean, people will say, okay, it's not because Russia really gives a shit. And okay, that may be true. Under Putin, they may not care particularly, but it's the outcomes that matter. It doesn't matter if Putin doesn't particularly care. The fact is they still do it, and it still provides more material aid.
In parallel going on against
and even
Iran,
then, I
but
find it a
also
bit
the
reductive,
cognitive
yeah.
warfare that targets the internal politics of Iran is part of this.
Because Putin isn't the only force in Russia, yes.
The Venezuela.
This is something that I've bitched about extensively in the past, which is like, everything about Russia is always boiled down to Putin. Putin is the personification of Russia, apparently. He's the human avatar of everything that Russia does. And it's like, this is not how Russia works. Like, and it never has been.
Model, etc. I think it's very simple.
He's an immensely powerful guy, to be sure, but there are many interests in Russia.
unrealistic to think that way.
Exactly. The Communist
for
Party is an all
basic
sinful these
reasons.
days.
The
Oh, no.
Iranian system, and I'm speaking as someone who taught comparative political systems for years now. The Iranian political system is basically very institutionalized. Namely, name another system whose top.
Yeah, there's exactly one country aside from China who's bothered to lock up this many billionaires or like otherwise strike them out, make them persona non grata, and that was Putin. Like, I hated Putin when I was younger. I hated him when the liberals loved him, like in the West. And I hated him primarily because of Chechnya and the way he conducted himself, like the whole anti-terrorist thing in the early 2000s. But over time, you come to view what he does. What's the word I'm looking for here? I can't remember the word. It begins with C. But, you know, you view it in a nuanced way. And it's like, yeah, I see what he's doing. And he did rebuild Chechnya anyway. And now Chechnyans love him. He learned some lessons. What could DPK help him do? He listened to Kim Jong-il's advice. Yeah. The trajectory of the liberal world and leftists, like, has just, with boats, like ships sailing in opposite direction. I forgot what the term is. I've had a bit.
Echelon are assassinated and is capable of continuing and also waging a retaliatory war effort against two big foes.
Looking with
I
DPRK
don't
helped
see
him,
any
yeah.
historical parallel to this. That speaks volumes to the institutionalized level of the system. Now, when you look at the system has many institutions from the bottom to the top. Everything happened after the assassination of the previous supreme leader went according to the book, according to the Iranian constitution.
I'm someone who gets called a Putinist in the past, even when I'm saying I don't like Putin, so I don't bother saying I don't like Putin. Yeah, it's like, fuck it, okay, yeah, sure. I like him. He's fine. Like,
and the procedures put in place in.
The thing is here, like, when people say you're an Assadist or somebody who's pro-Putin, it's, you know, you just have to ask, okay, what's wrong with that? What do you mean? Like, Putin is essentially, the thing that Putin is a guy who wanted to be part of Europe. He wanted to join NATO. He wanted to join the EU. But the fact is that the West wanted to loot that country wholesale. They wanted to be subordinate to the Western order. And he's a guy who just said, well, that's a line that I'm drawing. I'm not going to allow that. I'm not going to allow this country or my people to be exploited. You know?
The system according to its
They wanted a Yeltsin,
institutional
yeah.
capacity. And so you had the assembly of experts choosing a new leader, and you had the leader appointing heads of or commanders of the armed forces.
My one criticism of Assad, for example, is that he's just kind of an idiot. I mean, he's obviously a smart guy, like he's a doctor, but I get the feeling that he didn't have a realistic idea of the on the ground realities of Syria. Apparently, like, a few Iranians were leaked after he was ousted that he was making unrealistic demands. I think he didn't have I think that he didn't want to devolve any power. Like, he didn't want to, I think he didn't want to negotiate with the Kurds. That was something that he did that was, it's like he could have easily made and negotiated with the Kurds. I think the Kurds would have rather made common cause with him than, you know, the head choppers. But he blew that chance, even though I think the Iranians were telling him that you should do it.
the Iranian parliament,
Equivalent lessons of the Gaddafi as well. Yeah.
All of them. We had an interim leadership council that worked until the next supreme leader was elected. And the simplistic view of this institutionalized system is basically wishful thinking, because it's not only institutionalized. For every institution in Iran, there's a parallel institution. So if you wipe out institutions, the system will not collapse. It's basically designed to withstand collapse or withstand these kinds of shocks.
Sad because now this Kurds in Syria are in the worst position yet. Yes.
And
The Kurds will get fucked over by everybody.
so you have a parliament, you have a guardian council. That's the parallel thing. You have a judiciary, you have the revolutionary judiciary. That's a parallel thing. You have the Ministry of Intelligence, you have the intelligence of the IRGC, you have the army, you have the IRGC. So whatever you target, it's not only about figures, it's about institutions. Wipe out entire institutions and you will not get regime collapse or system collapse. That's, I think, is not understood at all in US political debates. And so when looking at this institutionalized system, you could see that it's working according to plan. It's working according to the procedures and the constitution. The supreme leader
I'll be right back.
was elected. In between, there was an interim supreme the leadership council of 3 people, and then the new supreme leader was elected. Who's running the show? I think he's pivotal. He is not only the leader, he's the balancer. That's the tradition in Iran's political system. From Ayatollah Khomeini to Ayatollah Khamenei, and now the new supreme leader, they are the balancers within the system. You have people from left and right in the system, around them. They would try to balance the system. They would try to balance the politics in the country, and they have the final say. And how does that work in practice? It goes through the Supreme National Security Council, the body basically that has 2 main tasks to do. First, to create consensus or build consensus on strategic issues, and second, to translate or bring in the buy-in of all power circles within the system. It has 13 members from the main stakeholders in the system, to representing the supreme leader.
I'm pretty sure everybody
President is the head of that council, but also it has a secretary
The
who
Kurds
was
especially.
assassinated, Dr. Ali Larijani, and then was replaced by the supreme leader. And so creating this consensus and then deciding on strategic issues is the main thing this body does. And it does it on the behest of the supreme leader, and to basically create a space for all parts of the system to have a say on the decision. And it's a tradition also that the supreme leader wouldn't oppose its decisions, because it's the consensual-based mechanism of decision-making. And that creates a bit of a delay in strategic decision-making in Iran, but it has worked to Iran's benefit, because
Circumspect was the word I was looking for. I just remembered it. I've learned to become circumspect about how Putin does things.
It's very much the bulk of, or the bulk of Iran's decision makers, a logic way of, or rational way of rationalizing strategic decisions are gathered in this body. And so it's a rationalization of the decisions that is ongoing on a consensual base that the system observes and accepts, I think.
It's interesting, the the sort of parallel information war Iran has really distinguished itself, not just in the kind of free sector with the the Lego videos and explosive media, but also there were moments that went viral in Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi's appearances on American television. His recognition in the world has really risen dramatically. He's become very familiar to also Western audiences. There's also a whole meme industry about him online. Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, has regularly engaged in
Just a quick bit of sidetrack here. Have you noticed that a lot of these Iranian fellows in the public eye are quite good looking? They're good looking fellows. The Iranians are good looking people. I've noticed. I've always said this, but only in the past couple of years I've started to think, yeah, my feelings have been confirmed. The Iranians are good looking people.
social media.
Afghans too, by the way.
battles against Trump. He's also been flexing his sort of knowledge of financial
What's up,
markets
Anello?
in talking about the kind of very clear insider trading that is going on. But there is this kind of momentum to a broader narrative that the person that the United States is dealing with right now is in fact the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, Ghalibaf. And you know, the American political system operates like that. And they're sort of everything you just said for the past minutes, your analysis and your academic explanation of how Iran is run becomes irrelevant in the broader
Nor is it a
discourse. And
good
it's just
weed level.
cult of personality. It's we're dealing with this new guy, Ghalibaf, and let's see if he's going to be.
I'm never going to be able to experience weed in a way that I prefer. So I'm leaving this country, and now, like, we're being kicked out of this house because the owner's selling it, probably. So if they get an investor, maybe we'll be able to stay longer. But if not, we're out of here in 2 months. We're leaving to Malaysia. And Malaysia, the drug, the weed, that's that's not happening there in any way. I was looking forward to getting edibles at some point because I can't stand the smell or the taste of weed. I can't stand it. I like the effects, but I don't like the smell or the taste of it. Not even vaping it. It makes me feel sick. But I do like the effects. When I lived in Portland, eating edible gummies was the best. That was peak.
Allowed to make a deal. If the IRGC is going to allow him and Arachi to actually make a deal, we'll see. And if not, we have to bomb them again. But can you, for people that are being told this, and
how's my drinking level? Sorry for pausing this so often, by the way. Trying to interact with chat. This is what streamers do, I heard. How's your drinking level? I'm drunk. I hate this. What is Australia doing? Australia has the ruling class has an entrenched suspicion and disdain for marijuana, for old Mary Jane. It's loosening up and it's becoming decriminalized. But even so, like, if I was to, I'm afraid to, I think I probably could get edibles now, but if I were to do that, I would just miss it when I move to Malaysia. I'm just not doing it. It's far easier to get booze in Malaysia than it is to get weed. Philippines is horrible on weed. Philippines?
this is the narrative that it really is dominant in Western media, including
Malaysia is
on
even
Al
worse,
Jazeera and
yeah.
elsewhere, that it's a Ghalibaf that's kind of in the driver's seat. What is the significance of him leading the Iranian delegation, and what kind of authority does he actually have right now?
Well, he brings in the authority that the
Listen,
Supreme
we're going to
National
get through to
Security
the end of the
Council,
video.
The blessings of the Supreme Leader are giving him. Absent those two, is a regular politician. He's, of course, a very strong personality. Is one of the people that were in the system from the get-go.
Yes, lock in.
He fought the Iran-Iraq War, and he was in every up and down in the past 5 decades of the Iranian history. And so he has knowledge, he has experience, he has a lot of connections, and he's very much trusted by the Supreme National Security Council and by the Supreme Leader. And so, absent that consensus within the Supreme National Security Council, I think he wouldn't have been meeting the Americans. So we have to weigh this into the Iranian political system and how it operates. I know that they are focusing on the personality because I think it's as you said, it's a cold politics thing in the U.S. that look at who replaces who and then we can deal with it. They cannot basically reckon with the reality that Iran has an institutionalized system. They need to see figures. But without the consensus that I explained, Mr. Ghalibaf wouldn't have met the Americans. Without that consensus, he wouldn't have talked to J.D. Vance. And so him going there is a decision by the political system to meet on a higher level with someone the Iranians saw as opposed to the war that was imposed on the country, that is J.D. Vance. And so they didn't want to go the same way they did before with Witkoff and Kushner, who didn't, basically they were doing Israel bidding in the discussions. Maybe J.D. Vance would do the same, we don't know, but at least the Iranians saw him as someone who was opposing the war and wanted to reciprocate in Mr. Ghalibaf being present there. But it's not about the person. It's about the system deciding to meet the United States on a higher level. And I think even the discussions and the topics that were discussed there, they were prior. I imagine they had been discussed before within the Supreme National Security Council. That's how it goes in Iran. So to give a lot of credit and sway to a single person basically misses the point of how the Iranian system operates. Now, of course, Ghalibaf, as a person, as I said, is very much a strong personality within Iran's politics, and of course, personalities matter. Personalities have a weight, basically, in the system itself. He has a weight within the Supreme National Security Council, which he is a member of as a Speaker of the Parliament, and so he's one of the 13 people within the system, within that body, and so he's part of the core of the strategic decision making within the system. But as I said, without the consensus, without the blessing of the Supreme Leader, because he has the power to veto the decisions of the Supreme National Security Council. He didn't. So he went on with the decision taken by that body. And so as much as you give a weight to Mr. Ghalibaf on a personal level, I think that pales in comparison with the authority that is given to him by a body that is tasked with strategic decision making. And that's why the Rodriguez Venezuela model is really ridiculous if you look at it through the prism of how Iran's political system operates. It's a very much inside the bubble discussion in Washington than related to reality on the ground in Iran.
Yeah, do you get the sense at all, there's a lot of reports that are, we should say, based on quote unquote U.S. intelligence or Israeli intelligence, that there are these divisions between the IRGC and the political echelons in Iran. Is this pure propaganda, or is there? I imagine, and I'm an outsider, I have no inside knowledge of Iran, but I would imagine that there certainly are very intense debates about strategy, and that you have very powerful personalities who represent large, powerful constituencies within the institutions of the state. But do you get a sense, Hassan, that there actually is a kind of friction or any disunity or conflict between the IRGC and what it controls in Iran and the political echelons that Ghalibaf and others are sort of representing?
Yeah, I think there is some merit to this in the sense that there are debates in Iran. I mean, as I said, within the Supreme National Security Council, you have different people talking, and they represent different power circles within the system. But the system is designed in such a way to observe those kinds of divisions or differences of opinions. Now, they have different strong opinions, and so that body is to remedy those and bring them closer to one another. Now, of course, I mean, to say that there are no differences basically defies the logic of human actorship in such a way that is happening within the political system in Iran and elsewhere. But to say that these are divisions, that one party is basically blocking and going its way, and the other is trying to reach an agreement with the United States, that's pure propaganda. That's my understanding. That's cognitive warfare aimed at the unity that has been kept during the heaviest bombardment of the country the past century. And so that is propaganda, to my understanding, aimed at creating division rather than seeing division. And I don't see it really materializing in any shape or form in tangible results that the United States and Israel are after. But what's important here is that you have those differences, you have a way to remedy them, and then you have also showed that you are working in accordance with the procedures you have in place. There has been a very clear announcement by the Supreme National Security Council right at the announcement of the ceasefire with the United States. 3 pages. It doesn't do that usually, but it was detailed. I haven't seen any Iranian official going a single word out of this announcement on an official mission, be it with the United States or with the region or with the world. Everything happened according to this 3-page document. And so to talk about divisions, I think, defies this reality on the ground that we have seen, and I think it's continuing to happen.
We only have a few minutes left, but I want to ask you about the narrative that has become the dominant narrative among the GCC countries. These are the Gulf countries that have been housing the U.S. military facilities that Iran has been striking in these retaliatory strikes. And some of the most intense debates that you've had, Hassan, on Al Jazeera, particularly on the Arabic language channel, although it also happens on Al Jazeera English. I want people to also understand that Dr. Hassan Ahmadian is debating people in 3 different languages at different times, and primarily during this war, it's been in English and in Arabic, and people can go online and watch. A lot of these have been translated and they've gone viral. But what's at the heart of it is that there is a narrative that is pervasive among the GCC countries and their leadership that Iran is the aggressor in this conflict. When the GCC countries sponsored a UN Security Council resolution, it didn't mention the terms United States or Israel. If you were to land from a different planet and just listen to the leaders of the GCC countries describe what's happening in the world right now, you would believe that Iran woke up one day and decided to just start bombing infrastructure and damaging civilian life of all of its neighbors. I would challenge anyone to find me a contrary narrative that is more realistic or factual than the one that I just stated. But Dr. Ahmadian, you've been then dealing with this on these panels. So as we end, I want to hear your sense of kind of what it's like when you're sitting there and you're basically being portrayed as representing the kind of villains in this, and you're on with all of these Gulf Arab analysts and sometimes American journalists you recently had a debate with. But also, more importantly, that narrative that all of these GCC countries are acting like this happens in a vacuum, and none of them are saying almost anything about the fact that the US and Israel launched this war against Iran in the same way that they did nothing about the burning alive of children in Gaza except offer thoughts and prayers. So both those issues, your appearances and the broader narrative as we end.
I think, it has been really surreal to listen to those discussions in absence of acknowledgement of the aggression that happened, unfolded, both from the United States and from Israel. Now, the United States part of it is very important because it banked on the CENTCOM enterprise, which is present in GCC countries. Now, when it comes to GCC positions, they have differences, of course. Oman is out of the it has been kept out of the war because it didn't allow the usage of its land against Iran. Qatar, in between the war, tried to stop attacks from its lands against Iran, and the Iranians were, calming things down with it right after the Ras Laffan attack in retaliation to the attack on Iran's infrastructure. Kuwait was a surprise to many Iranians because they didn't expect it to do what it did, giving land and bases to the United States to attack its neighbors. Now, UAE and Bahrain, normalizing with Israel, they have had not only American, bases, but also Israeli strong intelligence presence. And so they were used in the war. I mean, it's really surreal to listen to analysts denying only. Whereas if you take the same people out and talk to them, they would say, well, there is logic in what you say, but our official position is denial. We have to deny it. And so it's basically something that has been being talked of on TV, on media, but everyone knows what transpired in this region. The U.S. used these lands, used their spaces, and used their sea. The New York Times said it clearly that, well, office spaces and hotels were used after Iran attacked their bases. They moved to office spaces and hotels and conducted the war from there. And so there's no point in denying, but at this point, they are denying. They have been denying. And I think they are coming to terms with reality that they cannot just deny everything. They have to talk to Iran and come to terms with how to remedy this. Because, moving forward, if there's another war, the same thing will happen, if not worse. And so they need to find a way out of it. But when it comes to debates, as you said, denial is the main thing here. And it's easy to deny without providing any argument. And basically, denying means the end of argument. And you can't discuss anything with the person who's denying the reality on the ground because arguments are based on realities. But generally, I think there is a strategic shift in the GCC that I see, seeds of. That is, these bases did not protect us. Actually, the defenses that we had and purchased and paid heavy for have been used to defend those bases. And those bases, in turn, they are not for the security of the region. They are for the security of a single actor, that is Israel. That realization, I think, is very strong now, both on public level and on official level. Because before this war, there were talks of this, but you didn't have a clear evidence or experience to back your argument. Now you have it.
Yeah, there's one lesson for everybody in West Asia to learn, is that it doesn't matter how many billions you invest, it doesn't matter how many gifts you give, you are still an Arab to these people. You will still always be an Arab.
These discussions, I had discussions with many of my Arab friends. I think they are reflecting on these ideas. Why do we have these bases? Why are we putting ourselves in line of danger where the United States gets into a war without asking us and despite our advice or against our advice, and then continues the war and only talks about US assets and bases, and Israel did not care if we were attacked, and then get out of the war, go for a ceasefire with Iran without consulting us? What kind of a relationship is this? What kind of security providing that the United States is doing for these countries?
Something that
They are
Iran
basically,
realized a long time ago.
targeting their security, not providing them with security. And I think that realization is the basis of many changes that I see forthcoming in the future. But of course, many mistakes were made in the past few decades between Iran and GCC countries and other countries, including Iraq. I'm just hopeful that they will not repeat those and basically, move to a different direction where they don't need foreign presence. They can provide the security. Iran would not have to attack a base in Kuwait or in Qatar to stop aggression on itself. It would just, focus on its main foe, who is attacking us. That's I think, a hope that I think is closer to reality if you compare it to the before the war time.
Hassan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Dr. Hassan Ahmadian is Associate Professor of Middle Eastern Studies at Tehran University.
All right. Okay, thank you all for being here. Joining me on this post-dialysis Friday. I'll probably be on in about 12 hours for gaming. Wherever you are in the world. Good night and good luck. And I will see you guys later, probably on your stream. Ciao. Guess I'm leaving. Bye now, though.